Hey everybody, this is Mario Deniz, your host with the Keepin' It Real Estate podcast, and today I have my friend Jamie Miller in the podcast. How are you, Jamie?
I'm doing good, mate. Thank you for having me. Cheers.
Um, so this is going to be the first Keepin' It Real Estate podcast with someone that doesn't really work in the real estate industry per se.
Okay.
So that's new. That
Uh,
just means I'm probably running out of guests.
I don't know. Maybe it means that something stellar's about to happen. I don't know.
I
Something different, unique.
I think so. So before the podcast, um, you did a little card trick with me that kind of blew my mind, and so I'm hoping we can take that magic, no pun intended, forward in the podcast. You are a communication skills trainer, correct?
Yes. Communication coach is what I typically call myself. I have a website too, Doctor of Communication. So the idea
Okay.
is teaching what I call conscious communication. That's the focus.
What's the difference between you and some self-proclaimed self-motivating coach or self-help guru or one of those guys?
What's the difference? Okay, that's an interesting question. Obviously, everyone in the world wants to be original, and I don't want to just be original because of the way I sound when I talk over here.
Well, there's a few million people that sound just like you, so.
Yeah. I would say that, in particular, when I first was going out there getting clients for this business to teach communication skills, the reason that you got me on the show and the reason I came about is my initial thought was to go and help in the real estate industry. And one of the ways that I was hoping to separate myself for a lot of realtors out there was not to be Jamie in a box and not to be just this, you learn something for 7 weeks and then you know exactly what you're doing to go out there and do it. I felt, and I'm looking to only help in a customized approach. A very few number of agents was the initial approach. And there's a lot of cynicism in the industry because there are a lot of people, you're right, and we're trying to separate ourselves. But my idea, my platform was to hold someone's hand for an entire year and be on demand. So when they're facing different scenarios, it's not teaching sales to salespeople, as I mentioned beforehand, which you accepted. It's more about them understanding consciously when they're going into meetings with potential clients what they're saying, but not just what they're saying, why they should be saying it. It's kind of like with that card thing that blew you away. The idea is to go into interactions knowing what you want the outcome to be and learning the effective way to lead someone down that path.
Yeah, and we talked briefly beforehand, but um, what what we said was basically, if you go into a listing presentation and you know the outcome is you want to get that listing, you should probably have in your mind like certain check boxes through the process of things that you want to accomplish to make sure that you build rapport with that seller in order to lead them to a yes decision on that listing.
Absolutely. I would say that I speak, and again, the reason that realtors as well, and just so you understand, you've got people obtaining a license so they can practice being a realtor, but it doesn't necessarily have any prerequisite to have any communication skills, any knowledge of it. So when I approach in the real estate arena, and even external to the real estate arena, and I ask people, is building rapport important? They all say yes. But then when I ask them, do you know how to go about it? There's such a wishy-washy
Right.
approach to doing that. Some people say, I'm going to talk about a restaurant I went to. I'm like, well, let's say you said you went to a Mexican restaurant. I don't eat Mexican food. You've now separated us completely apart. It's like bringing up your own kids. If the person doesn't have kids, you're not building any rapport there. So like I explained to you beforehand, there's an exact formula to build rapport that you can do it every time, regardless who you're approaching, man, woman, young, old, that once they learn that formula and it clicks, they're like, this is something I can do every single time.
Tell me about that formula.
Tell you about the formula. Okay. So for instance, if I'm looking to build rapport with people, the idea behind building rapport is making people the same as you. All right. So the 3 words, if you can use them effectively, always work. You like me. Okay. If you can add the word you like me into a sentence at the beginning, you're making that person the same as you. And the formula is to start out general. And then as you can get more specific, you build on that rapport.
Give me an example.
Okay, so for instance, you like me, Mario. You like it when people are honest with you.
Okay.
All right, that's general. Everyone's going to say yes to that. No one's going to ever say no. I like it when
I
people
like
lie.
dishonest. Yeah.
Yeah, I like people lying to my face. Another one, you like me. You value your time. Okay, those are very generalized. When I'm teaching a communication class, the first question out my mouth before I even talk about I want to make sure that people value what it is I do before I share what I do. So I turn around and I don't make it the ego, the Jamie show. It's all about communication. You're here to learn communication. So I'm like, how many of you like me in this room believe that communication is critical? Who thinks it's critical? Show of hands. And then every hand gets raised. I'm like, and then I teach them. I'm like, I just built rapport with all of us in here, no matter what your background, we're all the same. We all value communication. Now watch this. If I want to get more specific, all right, if I'm in LA Fitness on a Sunday morning at 8 a.m. and there's very few people there, I can approach someone completely cold in that gym and be very specific in the rapport I build by saying, hey, you like me, we're in this gym at 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning whilst everyone else out there is doing whatever. Like, we think completely different than everyone else. So obviously, when it comes to this, we think the same. And they're automatically going to feel similar to you. So the idea is, if you can get specific, get real specific. If you can't get specific initially, you've got to start out general. And you bring up things that generally get you the same as them.
What's the hardest thing for you to overcome when you're talking with real estate professionals? Is it the cynicism that they feel like they might have run into a guy like you, even though what you do is completely different than anything that I've heard before? But is it that part? Is it the cynicism because they ran into a guy in the past that was, not delivering on what they said they would, or not providing proper value? Or is it that there's egos in the industry that people, automatically think because I sold $20 million worth of real estate last year, I must be a great communicator and you don't have anything to teach me? What's harder to deal with for you?
Okay, obviously I've learned a lot in a very short space of time approaching realtors. One of the interesting things, obviously, the nice thing is when you take someone from all the way novice and teach them stuff, right, that they didn't know, okay? And it's interesting, the clients that have worked with me from realtor industry, they're veterans. They're already doing business and they want to do more, and they do value learning. And thank you for the compliment on I've shared something different with you. They obviously saw that difference. For the masses that I'm approaching, if I may be transparent, I think that...
Please, Keeping It Real Estate podcast, not Keeping It Shady podcast.
Okay. At the end of the day, in their eyes, I'm a dime a dozen. I don't really get in front of as many. I'm not an online guru marketer where I'm like trying to... I try and do the online thing, but every one of my clients, funny enough, you never met me before. All right. Most people, don't know me. All right. And they're becoming my clients. All right. I feel like there's a lot of people who enter the industry because they've watched $1 Million Listing and they've heard it, all right, or they know a friend who's making tons of money in real estate. I don't know if they know the true backdrop of what that person's doing in work. The ones who are doing well, funny enough, they invest in themselves. They invest in training. They just don't tell everybody else about it. I think that people enter the industry and they go with brokerages whereby you have to only learn that system, that approach. I'm 22 years in now to studying communication and doing this stuff, and I'm still learning. And I learn from different sources. Right, so this notion that you can go and join a brokerage and then 7 weeks later of learning something, which primarily is learning how to do a contract, but we're going to sprinkle in some what they call sales training for those individuals.
A couple of 80s or 90 scripts.
Okay. It's no surprise that 90% are struggling. Now, when I share this stuff on this show, I do feel like when I'm sharing it, it's kind of like, yeah, this guy's just saying doom and gloom just to say doom and gloom. And a lot of it is cliche, but it is evident.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think, what you're saying has a very genuine root, and it's something that's very traceable. And it's been something that we've talked about before in here. A lot of the conversations that take place in the real estate world happen in echo chambers, meaning groups of people that are looking inwardly and trying to figure out between themselves who's the best at certain things. And so you see someone new enter the echo chamber, and suddenly, like, that's the next best thing. Like, everyone should learn from this guy. But I don't think the opportunity is given often enough to someone from the outside to present a case for for why people should be listening to what they have to say, and the value that they bring is important to what we do for a living. Because what you're talking about, building rapport, I mean, that's all their industry is about. I mean, I was never a sales guy. The top agents that I know, the best agents that I know, the ones that I would refer to my mom if she was looking for a house and I couldn't sell her a house, they're not salespeople by the classic definition of the guy that's going door to door. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. It's just, it takes certain skill sets to do things. And I believe in real estate, being good at sales is just one of those things. But there's a lot of people that are not your classic salespeople, but they're very good at empathy. They're very good at building rapport. They're very good at their organization skills, at creating a process that is the same every single time they sell a house, so their clients always experience the same thing. And all those things are important. But it seems like oftentimes we're just trying to push the sales thing. And that's something that I was curious to ask you about. Do you think someone like you that's teaching communication skills, which I would argue is a more sophisticated way of looking at sales, is that because people are more sophisticated today? Do you think that's why it's more relevant today than it might have been 30 years ago?
Look, today everyone's going a million miles an hour along Facebook. We don't know who's going to switch on and listen to the whole of this podcast. You capture people's attention very quickly. I will share with you what went to my mind when you were just talking about that. The funny thing is, I believe that everything is sales. Like a mother trying to get their kid to eat vegetables is technically selling them on something. And some people view sales in such a bad way. Some people view themselves as they're terrible salespeople, yet they're selling that. Like to be transparent, my ex-wife, she thought she was terrible at sales, yet she sold me on stuff every single day. All right. Like, so shout out for Rachel there. She's listening into this. Okay. Or anyone who knows her, but we are very amicable. So it's all good. But in terms of, so everything is a sale, but where I'll say the communication comes into play, and the psychology of this communication, the consciousness of it. Think about, this is interesting because every realtor is going to face this scenario. This could be impactful, and you can share me afterwards how impactful this can be. My house is worth X. All right, you go to someone, and is the world changing in real estate that listing price? It doesn't just go based on what the realtor thinks. They've got to deal with an appraiser, and there's so many different parties, right? But you approach someone who's emotionally charged. They're like, I think my house should be listed for X. Is that something that's very commonplace?
Oh, every time.
Okay. And if I put you on the spot, Mario, all right? Oh, actually, I won't put you on the spot. A lot of people out there, I'll just ask you if they say this. A lot of realtors, the second someone says, my house, I think it should be listed for X price, their initial response is, how did you come up with that price? Why that price? Okay. Now let's look at that.
That's actually just so that's what gets taught at a higher level. That's literally the objection handler for that.
Okay, well, let's look at this play, all right? And this is where I'm saying it's not sales, it's psychology, all right? It's consciousness. What's the one commodity on this planet that you do not get back?
Time.
If this doesn't go well for us, this is time that we're using, all right? But the idea is, if you and me, you want to blow people away.
I already wrote off that time, by the way.
All right, that's fine. But we're not getting it back.
Yeah.
All right. So think about this, right? You're going to let someone who's not the expert share with you, because you get to ask the question, which means you're controlling. Anyone who's asking questions controls the conversation. Anyone in any setting. Technically, if I want to be a smart ass, anytime you ask me a question, I can ask you a question straight back. All right, just because it's the psychology of understanding that formula. But here's what's interesting. All right, I think my house should be listed for X. How did you come up with that price? You've now given someone the floor, your time, who's not the expert, to elaborate and share emotional reasons why they think their house should be valued at X. And it's usually tied to rubbish as a credit card bill or something that they owe. So they're looking to get a specific number out the door, and they haven't even really done their homework on the closing costs and all the other sophisticated things that come into place. Yet they've got this number, what their house should be worth, based on what's sold down the street or something random. All right. So from that standpoint, just as an outsider coming into the industry, teaching conscious communication, there's better questions or better things that you can say at that precise point to take control of that situation where you don't give them energy. Because if you give someone ability to share that stuff, they're getting more emotionally charged. If you don't agree with them, you're coming in after the fact. It's
You're chasing them.
absolutely. So there are ways you can immediately take charge of that situation and be the expert that you're meant to be without being combative and without disagreeing with them and without agreeing with them and without using the word but. And in obviously my opinion, it's a higher level thinking. Yet, as you said, everyone in the industry is teaching them to ask them,
That's the gold standard.
how did you come up with that price? And and here's the scary part.
What would you ask?
Okay, well, first off, let me just explain
Sure.
that I've heard in the industry where agents will take on houses through fear of losing a listing, where they'll list it at what the person thinks it should be listed for just because they don't want to lose the listing.
Yeah, there's a
Right.
lot of that.
And there's psychology of like, oh, if buyers come along, maybe I'll get buyers for another property, so I'll list it. But here's the deeper root thing. If you're listing a property for a price that you don't think it can sell for, whose reputation are you really hurting too in the long run?
Oh, absolutely. But
So-
there's a disease in this industry, and it spreads like a cancer.
Okay.
And I don't know that it has a cure anytime soon. And it's that people get rewarded for the effort that they put forth, not for the results they produce. And so I've been in an office where someone gets a listing that's completely overpriced and everybody stands up and cheers because this person got a listing. You know, I know, and everybody in that room should know that this person just wasted their time, and this is an exercise of practice, if anything, of how to do a listing agreement. But there's a room of people standing up and cheering. And so what you're conveying to everybody in that room is go out and get listings. Who gives a shit if they're going to sell or not? Like, just get listings because you're going to get the standing ovation. And so
two things. One, there's probably intrigue that I actually share how I would address if someone said their house should be listed
Sure.
for X. So I'll get there in a second. The second thing is this: understand, and I don't. Some stuff when I say I've made up myself, some stuff I've done hybrid situations where, I teach people how they can get upgrades on aeroplanes, knowing just one question on what to ask the ticketing agent. And we can go there if we want to. But the other thing is this: in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, all right, I'm a big advocate. It's a great book. It shares one of the biggest things that we crave more than anything else is appreciation. So that when people are standing up in the room clapping, that's the biggest reward, more so than the money. All right. So that doesn't baffle me at all. With regards to if someone said my house should be listed for X, I actually did this approach on you before we even started this podcast. All right, you shared about skepticism and your thought process.
Yeah.
And all I responded was, I said these exact words, Mario. I get it. I can see why you're thinking that way at this specific moment. There's something I haven't shared yet about my feelings about skepticism. Is it okay if I share that with you? And you said, yeah, sure, go ahead. All right. Everything I teach transcends all situations, so this is good. If someone said, my house should be listed for X, I'm like, I get it. Pause. I can see completely why you're thinking that way at this moment. There's some items I haven't shared with you yet. Is it okay if I share that with you? By the way, obviously you understand the situation. You're dressed professionally. Can you appreciate that I take this very seriously? I'm really professional about what I do. Oh, and also on top of that, I didn't just come here today just with my own thought processes. I had a whole team to make sure that when I came out here to you to discuss this with you, that I'm fully prepared. So is it okay if I share with you those results? Do you see where I didn't say I agree with them? I don't say I disagree with them, and I don't use the word but. I'm sharing that I get it. I see why they're thinking that way at this specific moment. I haven't shared where I think their house should be valued to be able to build up the credibility of why something, and then I'm going to throw in a question. Do you see where this makes logical sense? And they're going to, and if it doesn't, I can explain more.
Yeah, what you what you do there is you're one of the biggest problems that real estate professionals have to overcome is um, because there's agents that are very professional and do a lot of business, and you have a whole spectrum all the way. I don't know how many businesses that the spectrum of pay is from $0 to $10 million a year in the same exact profession. Like, if you go at a brain surgeon, I'm sure there is a spectrum, but it's much narrower than what you would find in real estate oftentimes. So one of the things that we have to overcome when we sit down with people that have never met us is you have to you have to come across professional. And so one of the things that you did with your comeback or your response to the disagreement on the price is you're obviously telling them that you put thought into this. B, you're telling that you're working with a team of people, and that you're sharing resources that you have to get to the price. So it's building your credibility up simultaneously, which is, by the way, one of the reasons why I've always told agents that I enjoy working in an office that has the space and sort of like a nice conference room that people can walk into. Because when I say to someone that I've never met before, meet me at Starbucks, I can look the part, but I'm still just a Starbucks. They don't know if I'm working out of my house, out of a trailer, out of the back of a van. But if I tell them, meet me at the office, by the time I see them, they already come in, they saw a receptionist, that's kind of built up my credibility in their eyes. By the time we sit in the conference room, they're like, oh, this guy, he must be a professional, right?
Absolutely. Look, the what you say, why you say it, and having a deeper understanding in that regard, obviously it has its place, and I value it highly enough that the idea is to teach people that. The truth of the matter is, I read a book by Richard Branson called "Screw It, Just Do It." Okay, and it's really cool. And he says that he makes decisions on people or ideas within 60 seconds flat. Now, it's all very good for people to say, well, he's a billionaire, so he probably thinks differently. The truth of the matter is, everyone makes decisions on people within the first 5 seconds. So obviously, how you're dressed. Me, I would love to be dressed in a t-shirt and what have you, and go out there and be like, my vibe is my tribe. But until you get to a place,
that's a little too close to Russell Brand. So,
but you catch my drift. Like the thought process is you should never have to apologize for how you put food on your kids' table, as long as you're legal, ethical, moral. All right, and you want to fit a certain vibe for yourself. It's not about being forced, but I dress the part so to get taken seriously,
of course,
right? And so that's what you're elaborating.
Dress for the job that you want.
Yeah, and I get where I'm at in that process, right, Mario, with doing that. I believe that a lot of realtors might dress the part and they can get that part completely down, but there must be an epidemic of some regard that 90% struggle, and only 10%, and they're being fed this story. It's like people go to college and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. You go to Rollins, it's 244 grand today. I went to Rollins. And people are living this story where conventional education is what they're just meant to do. And if you look at it, it doesn't produce results. I've met plenty of people who go to a college like that and they come out and then they're working admin work, earning $14 an hour, and they're not happy. It's the same thing for realtors. They're being fed this story that if they learn this, they're going to have success, but only 10% are having that success.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack with that idea, and part of it is expectations, which we're going to talk about in many regards, but it's no different. Expectations are king on any relationship, whether it's with your spouse, whether it's business associates, customers. If you set proper expectations, chances are you're not going to run into as many landmines as you would otherwise.
Absolutely.
And I think what happens a lot with real estate professionals is the expectations are not clear. And they're not clear because there's a recruiting competition amongst brokerages to get...
Oh, I see it out there.
To get the the highest number of agents under their fold. And that's because a lot of brokerages run something that would equate a little bit to a gym membership model. You know, you have 1,000 members, 900 forget that they're members and they're still having the money deducted from their credit card, and 100 are the ones that are actually showing up. Because if everybody showed up, the facilities would collapse. And so brokerages run a lot of that model. And so oftentimes what I've noticed is what they do in order to try to get people to sign up with them is provide false expectations that don't match the reality of the business. Is saying, hey, Jamie, you just got licensed. Great, man. It's going to be awesome. We have this training program. You know, we just had an agent close her first deal within the first 45 days. Absolute $500,000 house. She got $15,000 commission. It was incredible because we have this great training program. And listen, I really think, I know you want to start doing this part-time, but I really think you should start full-time because we have a class starting next week. It's only $800, but a small price to pay because you'll be making 200. The average person closes 17 transactions on that class. So by the time you're done with that class, you'll be making $200,000. And so when you tell people stuff like that, they sign up under this false belief into a career that is not what's been depicted at that point, you know. And so that's a great part of the reason for the number of agents that unfortunately end up falling out of the business is they weren't, you know, a lot of them there's personal responsibility. A lot of them are not talented enough. A lot of them don't put the work. A lot of them, you know, there's a lot of the, you know, we have to make generalizations to have conversations. But
Right.
my presumption is that a big number of the agents that don't make it in the industry is because someone at some point in a position of leadership fed them a bullshit story that doesn't match the reality. And they were disillusioned from that point forth the second they dip their toe into this pool and they're like, oh, wait, there's no flexibility of schedule. Like, I have no weekends. Like, fuck. No one told me
It's
that.
funny you say that because I speak to people, and have you ever heard people buy an emotion and then justify with logic?
Yeah.
Right. So I have a formula approach to get someone to an emotional space. All right. Just asking questions to get them to an emotional space. The funny thing is people still talk themselves, and we all are good at justifying. We can all look in the mirror and justify why we do what we do and make sense of something. It's amazing the amount of realtors I approach because you just shared the actual accurate truth of what goes on out there, right? The funny thing is those agents are still happy. Why? Because they were in an even darker place before where they felt like they were working an office job or they felt like they were working something. So just being able, they're not seeing they don't have their weekends. They're not seeing that scenario. They're thinking, oh, I've got a life with my kids more so. And the scary part is some of what I teach is how you can set up a relationship with a client, a potential client, where they actually respect your time so that you can have your life and cake and eat it too and have a relationship with your kids. And they respect how you operate by just being able to tell the right stories, build the right situations in your initial meeting with a client so you can have that life. But I see a lot of realtors where they're veterans and they work very hard. They do very well for themselves, but they still feel like they're working way too hard for their clients. That's the veterans. On the other spectrum, you've got these newbies and they're fed that story and they believe that story and they believe they've got their time, and you've just accurately shared they don't. They don't get their weekends. They don't have, it's not the life that they were
not when you're new in
promised.
the industry. Listen, if I was to talk to a new agent, which I do on occasion, and I say you want to get into the industry, I say for the next 12 months of your life, kiss and goodbye your vacation time and your weekends. And I think that's not unreasonable. Like, I I I I did really well my first year in the industry precisely because I did that. And so a lot of times this is a repetition game. You know, when you're talking with buyers or sellers, you get better the more of them that you talk to. So if you're only exposed to one buyer a month, and it requires it's that principle of 10,000 hours to mastery, which I'm sure you're familiar
Yeah,
with.
of course.
And you know, if it's 10,000 hours to mastery, and we say we're going to translate that to be 100 clients to mastery, 100 customers to mastery, if you only have the opportunity to speak with one a month, it's going to take you 100 months to get there. But if you kiss goodbye your weekends and you kiss goodbye your vacation, you might be able to average 5 a month. And so now you're not looking at 100 months, you're now looking at 20 months for mastery. And so I think.
Let me ask you let me just ask, because this might be an epiphany moment for you, which would be interesting
Sure.
and interesting for the viewers. You're a veteran now, where you're not in that first year, right?
No.
But you know that expression, kissing a lot of frogs, learning a lot of lessons, right? You get that to that mastery, you call it. If if I was say I'm an advocate as you start as you mean to go on, and you can do that. So for instance, let's say you've learned certain lessons, right, and you can now teach those lessons to a new agent. And let's say it wasn't necessarily about not having your weekends and you're not having your evenings and not going on a vacation. What if it was about setting up the right relationships with the potential clients when you meet them, so that you get them to understand your shoes, your side of things? So for instance, you've got a baby that's sleeping, all right, in the house. So the idea is this. Watch this. If I'm meeting you and you're my client, a potential client, and I've got you interested in using my services, I'm going to be like, look, I'm just curious. I'm just going to run something by you so you have a full understanding of where I'm coming from. You've got kids, right? Yeah, so you'll totally get this, all right? If you were me and you were a realtor and you were going out there and you were working really hard and you knew you were going to do everything possible within your power to find your client the house of their dreams, okay? But you have kids too. Would you want to be able to provide the service for your client, all right, that's stellar, but at the same time be able to have an existence, that work-life balance where you got to hang out with your kids too? Is that something that you would want? And that can you see where the client will be like, yeah, absolutely. Then you're totally going to understand that the way I typically operate, and it's not always going to be the case, but for evenings and weekends, I save that time for my family, for my kids. Now, it's not, if you want to see a house on a random Saturday, I'm sure we can make that happen. But understand that we're going to be able to find the house of your dreams that works for you. And I'm going to work very diligently to do that between the hours of 9 to 5 through the week. And when you see a house, all right, or when we find a house, we'll structure a time to do that. And then let them, if they come back with an objection, well, those times don't work for me, I may then have to explain another story about, have you ever had Spectrum come around your house? What do Spectrum do? And just try but the idea is this, is they're not doing that approach. They're at all. They're just making themselves available 24/7. I've seen realtors where they're emailing a client at 7 a.m. on a Sunday morning when they don't want to be, And
Yeah,
so
and
I'm just curious on your feedback, because that's something that I teach, Mario. And I think that it sets up more success as an expectations between yourself and the client.
I think there is room for it, but I think this gets said a lot, and I don't think it's by coincidence.
Okay.
We are an on-demand society, meaning if you click a movie on Netflix and the little wheel spins more than 4 or 5 times, you back out and click back in it because something must be wrong that it took this thing 10 seconds to load. 10 seconds, like that's nothing for a movie. We used to take longer to rewind a VCR back in the day, but
Blockbuster's out of business because they didn't buy into that model taking place.
right,
Yeah,
they would charge you if you didn't rewind because it would take them too long to rewind the movies. But this on-demand society, what happens is oftentimes you don't get the opportunity to explain yourself to the customer. The customer calls. It's a cold call. It's someone that comes off of an internet site and calls in, and he's like, hey, yeah, I'm looking at 123 Main Street, and I'd like to see if I can take a look at it this afternoon. And
okay, so understand, and I get that. All right, so let me just address that for a second. The initial scenario I'm talking about is where you actually structure a meeting where you're going to go and meet with a potential person who's looking to buy a house, and you've got some time frame to build on that. And that discussion is not taking place. Right. All right. So that's where it's elevated for the listeners who aren't doing that. You're missing an opportunity to structure and set the right expectations so they see. But notice I said, you're going to see where I'm coming from. If you were me, it's a strategy of putting someone else in your shoes so they're having buy-in rather than just telling someone, oh, I leave my weekends and my evenings. Notice it was a soft approach. I didn't really go into the breakdown of how that went. And obviously, I'm asking the audience to understand that. Obviously, there is elements where you're getting the call, the random call. You could still maybe have a discussion. I'm not trying to make it just like, oh, this is some drink that they're taught to do in that situation. you're there to make money. So if it's but I would definitely qualify that person on where they're at before I jump in the car.
I jump on the car right away.
You jump in the car right away.
Jump on the car. You know why? I'll tell you why.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll tell you why I jump on the car. Because 9 out of 10 people that meet me in person fall in love with me.
Oh, well, that's a great confidence to have.
And so if I get in front of these people personally, I know that I have a 90% chance that I will sell them a house.
Okay.
And if oftentimes we say that, we should, time blocking is a thing that's preached a lot, just kind of like create your schedule so that you can have more of this work-life balance, which we can go into more detail in a little bit. But part of the concern sometimes in real estate is that, again, that creates a little bit of a false notion in that, listen, oftentimes you spend Monday through Wednesday doing nothing productive in terms of meeting new customers, signing new contracts, showing property, because maybe you already went through all your leads and maybe you've gotten them under contract and maybe you've been very efficient. And so you don't have, you went through a little bit of a slump. You're not having anything incoming either. And Thursday, the phone rings off the hook and people want to see property on the weekend. Like, well, I'm going to show property on the weekend. And so personally, my formula is a lot of agents try to work harder during the downturn because they panic. And then they got to work really hard when things are hot because there's no other choice because there's business coming in. And so I'm the opposite. Like, not necessarily the opposite. Like, I work really hard when things are hot, but when things are slow, I'm not trying to.
Well, you said you're not really a prospecting, a cold calling and things of that nature, which means this. It means you're conscientious about the lifestyle that you want to lead. And that's what I'm sharing. All I'm sharing is there's a lot of agents where they feel like they're working too hard and they don't want to be working as hard.
Pussies.
And maybe. But and obviously, specifically from my standpoint, the way I'm looking at it is there's a lot of situations where there's a miscommunication or not clear communication. And so the expectation and the opportunity to have that kind of discussion is always in your initial chat with someone. Because once you sign them up, 4 months down the road, they want to see a house and you want to spend time with your kids. You can't have that discussion then and there. It's too reactionary. So the idea is to always be proactionary in your communication, in your deliverables to someone. I love the fact that if someone calls you up, if you get in front of them, there's a confidence that comes with that. And there's obviously, you've learned a lot to get yourself, to that place. I think that obviously the fact that a veteran realtor has taken me on, do you know what I mean, as a client is obviously not what I was projecting would happen. And maybe a lot of this podcast is geared towards the realtors where if you can sway or achieve results where one person sees the light, do you know what I mean, as a result of the show, to be like, you know what, I was fed that story. Like I see it very clearly. And obviously the sooner the better. If there can be elevation in the conversations that they're having with potential clients, that they can actually see the lifestyle by design. Me, I love doing this right now. I've been used to jumping on airplanes, doing a schedule I didn't want to do. So for me, I'm purposely creating a lifestyle by design and creating on demand. You talked about on demand. My whole thing was to provide an on-demand service for realtors or whoever it takes on my services. I've got a drywall restoration company like I just met with before coming here. On demand to me means if they're going to see a potential client, I role play with them on what they were going to say with that client, or afterwards they're able to give me a call and find out what happened, rather than have to go online and watch some video or things of that nature. So the idea is to be on demand for people. So I understand that you have that feeling of feeling on demand. The next point is this. You can't work with every client on the planet, and some clients are not going to be worth your time to do that. Have you ever had a headache client?
Oh, I recently broke up with one, and a lot of agents take a lot of pride on that. They'll post on Facebook, today I broke up with a client. I don't take pride on that because I don't think it's a good thing. Like, I don't see it as a great accomplishment that you can tell someone to go kick rocks. Like, if that's the thing that's going to build your confidence, you're extremely weak, mentally. But I just recently had to break up with a client because And this is what I told them. I said, every time we're showing you homes, I am making a risk assessment in my mind of the cost reward of this relationship. And so that's why I'm very efficient at what I do. And that's why I have the conversations that I have up front. And that's why I narrow
Notice you
down
just
searches.
said up front.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's why I narrow down searches and I try to make it as effective as possible. I feel that I've put the house that's the best, the perfect house for you several times in front of you, and you've talked yourself out of it through some objections that are quite frankly not reasonable from my eyes. So I don't believe I've reached a point in my risk assessment that I don't believe this can be a profitable situation for me. Therefore, I think you're probably best off working with a different agent.
Okay.
And so, you know, there's certainly a situation where not every client is for every person. And I tell agents just to be careful with that, because sometimes people, like I said, take too much pride on the breakup part. Like that builds them up a little too much.
Nothing ends nicely.
Right.
All right. So I get that, and we certainly shouldn't be going on Facebook and pushing and cheering about that fact, right?
Yeah, but it's kind of like I showed him up. You know, I told him something. I don't know.
Look, do you know what? It's interesting because one of the things you said there very clearly, which I 100% believe is not being done sufficiently in the industry, is again, it's all about that initial discussion. If I'm going to be an agent, I'm showing buyers around properties, I'm going to turn around to them and I'm going to actually say, hey, look, when I show you a property that ticks all your boxes, all right, just understand, right, that you're going to be confident in making a decision to put a contract on that house. I'm walking them through, I'm time warping, as I call it, the situation. So when they go through a house that ticks all the boxes, there's none of this, hey, we're going to sleep on this, all right? Or I'm going to
If you sleep on it, you won't sleep in it.
Okay, you can use the tagline. Yeah, I know that's taught. But
the bumper sticker? No.
The idea is to seed for success a relationship, because I've actually gone into an office and a realtor was in tears on a Monday morning, right, in tears. And I cheered her up and it was all good. But she was in tears because for 6 months she was showing a buyer around houses who happened to be their friend. And on that particular weekend was the one weekend that she didn't show them around the house, all right? And they went and saw a house, and the selling agent said there's no commission for a buyer's agent. So for 6 months of her life, she waited. The whole reason that I focus on what I focus on and teaching is so there's no time feeling like time wasting and you're not in tears too. If you're seeding a situation where they can feel confident, as nervous as they be, and you project, you're going to be nervous. But understand that when you sign a contract, you're still giving yourself 7 days or whatever period of time to do your due diligence. All you're doing is securing to make sure that the next day, because what do you think happens if you don't put a contract on a home? All right, what do you think happens the next day? If you love it, do you believe somebody else will love that property? Yeah. And so you get them you get them to understand. So here's what happens. When you get to the home and they are nervous and they're shaky and they've ticked all the boxes, there's none of this, oh, we're going to sleep in it. Hey, do you remember when we talked back here and I explained this particular scenario could take place? We're right in it right now. Do you believe that I know what's in your best interest? That's a great question, by the way. Because when you ask someone, do you believe me? Like, watch this. Do you believe that I've studied communication a long time, Mario?
Sure.
You do. So do you believe I might know things about communication that you don't know?
100%.
100%. You're not just telling me that because you feel like I want to hear that. You
No.
that.
I mean, absolutely.
Okay. So watch this. You believe I can teach you stuff, right?
Sure.
And you would value that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm not paying you.
But
No,
do you know what the truth of the matter is? Technically, from a confidence standpoint, because I've asked you, do you believe me? And you've said yes. All right. That is such a powerful question. It's one of the most powerful words out there. And if realtors are not consciously asking their potential clients or their clients, do they believe? Right? Because if that moment, do you believe I've got your best interests at heart here? Do you believe I know what I'm talking about? Yes. Well, then you'll trust me. All right. You'll write the agreement. And it's something that's just not there's too many variables. I use that sentence consciously all the time.
Yeah, it's a very effective one for sure. I mean, I don't know a scenario where someone says no to one and says yes to the first one, then can say no to the second one. It doesn't
That's
happen.
the point. You can't.
It doesn't happen.
You can't say no when you say you believe. That's why you said I'm not paying you something, because technically, you know, I could take you to that place
Yes,
where you
yes,
can.
yes, yes.
I'll be like, how many deals do you think that could get you?
Yeah,
And
right.
like, so if you're, again, I don't know. I feel like there's some people who are like, oh yeah, I know this, I know that, but they're not always using it. You know, they a simple formula. Whoever's asking questions is steering conversation. All right, they might have heard that, but watch this. There's good questions, there's bad questions. All right, this might be a teaching moment for you too, Mario. I hope so. Obviously, from my standpoint. Let's say someone does something wrong to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they do something really wrong to you. What's your first initial gut response as a question? What do you ask them? What will most people ask in that moment?
If somebody did something wrong with
Most people say this when someone does something wrong to them. What do they immediately respond with a question back?
what's wrong with you?
What What were you thinking?
Or what were you thinking? Yeah.
Why did you do that?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Do you remember the scenario with the I think my house should be listed for X?
Sure.
All right. Okay. Think about time again. It's all about what I'm teaching is, and hopefully this will come across to the realtors, is how do they streamline their time, because it's the one commodity we don't get back, and to have the most effective dialogue with someone. If someone does something wrong to you and you say, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? You had the power because you asked the question, and you steered that conversation, Mario, to a place now where they're coming up with all the reasons why they did it, and they're thinking why they did it, and they're explaining it to you, which is only going to make you more agitated as you hear it, and then you're going to come back in afterwards and tell them what a moron they are, all right? So a better question in that moment it would be, hey, why shouldn't you have done that? And now you're going to see their eyes go in their head, and they're going to think of the reasons why they shouldn't have done it, and they're going to explain the reasons they shouldn't have done it to you, meaning you're seeing that they have a better understanding of those things. So again, with the scenarios we're talking about, a lot of it is just understanding. You can see the right relationships with your clients. You don't have to do you don't necessarily have to. Some things that are cliche are 100%. They're cliche for a reason, because they actually are true. Right, but if they sleep in it, they're not sleeping in it. I get it. It has its valid point. I'm saying that originality, that's a big thing. You asked me about the beginning about originality. The idea is to create originality in your rapport building, originality in building urgency, originality in your discussions, so you don't sound like every other bloody realtor out there.
Yeah, because that's also a concern in the industry, that because a lot of the trainings and teachings happen in sort of an auditorium setting, it's difficult sometimes for agents to sound different than other agents because they've all learned from the same school of thought. And so it's important, I think, that what you're talking about, to me, hits the core of one of the problems going forward, and is buyers and sellers today have access to more information about their homes or the homes that they want to buy than ever before. By the time that I meet a buyer, they've already seen what the neighborhood looks like. They know what the street looks like. They know what the house looks like. They've taken a virtual tour of it. So, aside from smell, they are very familiar with everything about this house. They know what the taxes, the homeowners association, they know everything. And so we got to provide value in different ways, and we got to be efficient with our time, because also there's something called commission compression, which means commissions in real estate have been trending downward over the last few years because there's more agents entering the industry. They don't have a value proposition other than I can do it for less than the other guy. And so that's bringing the overall commissions a little bit lower, which means each deal becomes less profitable, which means you have to be more efficient if you want to continue to keep your head above water. And I think what you're doing is teaching people also how to become hyper efficient by being conscious about what they say and the result that their words will have on their prospects.
Huge. And I'll go one step further. All right, because I know that I've been to a brokerage, gave a training, and this was going on. I asked this in a room, all right? I said, how many of the agents, you're getting on the phone and you're saying, hi, this is so-and-so with so-and-so. Is that a common thing that everyone's saying out there?
Sure.
Okay, think about that.
People pay $800 for that.
Okay, well, think about the fact that people are saying, I'm so-and-so with so-and-so. Every agent's out there doing it. They're spending their time all day long, working hard, doing things that you wouldn't do because you're not going to prospect with cold calls, but they've chosen to spend their time cold calling. So they're cold calling and they're like, I'm so-and-so with so-and-so. One, they're not separating themselves from anybody else. Two, if they actually think deep down to themselves, what do they do when someone calls them cold and says, I'm so-and-so with so-and-so? The immediate reaction is to want to hang up. Yet they've got no originality, no different approach on how to build rapport on that phone call other than I'm so-and-so with so-and-so. I've had one agent share with me, we're told to do that. We have to declare who we are. I said, yeah, but no one said you have to do it in the first it doesn't have to be the first thing out your mouth, right? And so I was in this room of realtors doing this training and they were like, oh man, that was amazing epiphany, because here's what they understood. If they don't learn a different approach, they're spending years only knowing that approach. It's like a guy going up to a girl, can I buy you a drink? All right. Or you're beautiful. Or, you know, I'm such and such a lawyer and I've got a fancy car in the it's so unoriginal and they've heard it all before. Yet because people don't know any different approach, that's what they're doing. They're spending all their time doing that activity, Mario. It's archaic, you know, in the grand scheme of things. So it goes deeper level than it just trying to streamline your time. It's what are you doing during your time when you're actually you're working 100%, you're working, giving all your effort, and you're just spin dialing, and every agent on the planet is doing it, and no one's sounding different to when they're calling FISBOs or when they're calling up prospective leads. There's no wonder people are sick. Do you know what I mean? Are tired of hearing from them.
Of course, and there's sometimes very little thought given in these trainings to a very fundamental question, which is how can you maximize the results with less effort? You know, I kind of equate it to the people that like working out like in really hard environments. You know, like some people go to the gym where it's 70 degrees, 75 degrees, and some people put themselves in a really uncomfortable position and they kind of enjoy that. And a lot of times in real estate, I think what happens is, specifically with the cold calling, it's kind of self-understood that you're going to get every 100 hang-ups for every person that's going to listen to you. So like the mantra is like, let's get this 100 hang-ups done and over with so that we can get to the one that's going to listen to me. And again, I'm not someone that has ever spent any measure of time trying to be good at cold calling because it's just not my thing. But I've always felt that if I wanted to become good at cold calling, I wouldn't be thinking about let's get through the 100 hang-ups to get to the yes. I would be thinking like, we need to do better than 100. Like we gotta, if I'm gonna go through 100 hang-ups, at least there's gonna be some trial and error going on through those 100. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna be trying a new thing to see if we can get it to 90.
Watch this. Watch. You go into any mall in the country, all right, and you go into any Macy's in the country, all right, and you walk in. What is the question that the sales clerk asks you?
How can I help you?
May I help you?
Yeah.
And what do 9 out of 10 people say to that?
I'm good. I'm just looking.
All right. Did you know that person's paid on commission?
I know, but yeah.
All right. No. They're being paid on commission.
Yeah.
Meaning, like you just said that what you would do different. All right. If I was a sales clerk and I know that I'm being paid on commission and I'm going to ask a question and 9 times out of 10, someone's going to say, no, I'm just looking, thanks. All right. To keep saying, may I help you? Because you don't know any other different approach. Again, it seems archaic. Listeners, do you all agree? That seems archaic to do. All right. So, like, watch. Right. Look, hey, have you seen anything you like yet? Say no.
No.
Okay. You know, someone like came in with your build the other day. I showed them this section over here, and they absolutely loved it. But by the way, if you don't see anything over there, right, I know for a fact we'll have something in this store that you love. Right. If you start giving me body language that you don't want my help, you know what? Sometimes you like me, I love to just be looking on my own too. When you see something you like, I'm here to help you. Do you see the elevated different of approach? You
Sure.
can. All I'm asking, have you seen anything you like yet? You can say no to it, and I can still help you.
Right.
But it's different than may I help you? It's understanding you've
Nope.
come. So the idea with the phone call is starting out like, so for instance, you know, I helped with this. The psychology, it's the understanding of psychology of when you're phoning people. Think about this. If you're thinking the routine, I've got to make 100 calls and I'm going to get 100 no's. That's what they're thinking in their head going into this. So it's like every call is laborious. It's like, okay, you know, I'm saying every single phone call I make, I'm trying to make it impactful as possible. And I'm not taking my last phone call into my next phone call because they could be completely different people in completely different scenarios. And I'm acting like I'm calling a friend. Hey, Mario, I've got a smile on my face. Maybe I'm standing up. I'm not feeling like I'm in a box. Do you know, like doing this tedious task?
And so I don't mean to cut you
No, of
off,
course.
but oftentimes what I see happening with agents is that the person doing the training has read a few of the books, a few of the sort of psychology 101 type books, and a few of the prospecting books, and they'll be like, okay, you're supposed to stand up and be cheery and put your shoulders back and have a smile on your face. And they'll do all those things, but they don't spend any meaningful amount of time teaching the agents, like, let me talk to you for a second. Let's role play, and let me talk to you, and let's get you to a point where I feel like you're ready to take a phone call. No, they just set these agents loose on the phones. And then
Sometimes there's role play to role play, and it just seems archaic and it's monotonous. And I don't believe in role playing just to. You could never assume what someone's going to be like on the other line, and sometimes you're learning stuff through the school of hard knocks with that. I do believe in the psychology of like acting like you're calling a friend. All right. I do believe in you shouldn't be saying I'm so and so with so and so as the first words out your mouth. Watch this. Hey, Mario. Like, okay, look, if you're anything like me, getting calls from people you don't know, it's not always the most fondest thing. I promise I'll keep this really, really brief. That cool?
yeah,
All right. It's a different approach that, and it's showing I respect your time, and it's actually being transparent. It's actually saying I'm calling you cold. You know, it's okay. A lot of
that's
people.
brilliant. It's brilliant. It's funny because the sales
So I
rep,
just taught something there, by the way. That
yeah, for sure. And so the salesperson that works at the company that sold me all the studio equipment, I called them and I had some questions and some inquiries, and I'm like, when I was done with my questions, I was like, okay, well, great, thank you so much for. And he stopped me and he goes, wait, don't get off the phone yet. If you're gonna purchase something, just know that I get paid commission. So it'd be great if I can take this sale on the phone versus you going to do it online. And I was like, well, you know what? To me, 6 or half dozen. Why wouldn't I do it on the phone if it's going to get this person commission? And there's a level of transparency that I wholeheartedly appreciated, because sometimes I'm very conscious, because I've worked on commission my entire life, that if when someone is getting paid commission, I try to make sure that they get paid. Like, or if I walk into a store, before I go to, any random register, I go to someone and be like, hey, you want to ring me up, so that they can get the credit. But oftentimes we're in this autopilot mode and I'm not thinking about it. And this was one of those times where I called, asked my questions, and I was ready to hang up to punch the order online. And he stopped me and he's like, hey, I get paid commission. And I'm like, well, shit, then let's just get this done. Let's get you paid, And it was that honesty. It's doing sales from a place of honesty, like he's been honest.
Do you know the truth? The truth of the matter is, that's all it boils down to is transparency. And I'm 100% advocate, always being transparent. When I'm selling to a business, I'm selling to a business person. I understand there's a bottom line typically. I'm calling it out. Just so you know, 100% I'm here to sell you. That's 100% factual. Let's just lower that resistance right now. But here's the deal with this. Can we just make one promise to each other? Just one. All right. I'm going to ask you questions, and you're going to know exactly what I'm doing, why I'm asking it, and everything. All right. It's like the King of Diamonds. All right. I'm gonna ask you questions. Just let's make a promise to each other that we're going to be really genuine, 100% genuine. Right, so I promise you, when we leave here, we'll both leave here with smiles on our faces. Is that a deal?
Sure.
And then what I do is I put my hand out.
Yeah, of course. And everybody.
And I anchor it, and I anchor that moment. I shake their hand. And so now, and then we can just have a very frank discussion. And what you've done is you've lowered the resistance. It happens in other walks of life too, where people have this like spider senses or something that they're thinking, when something coming. If you just call things out at the beginning and be transparent at all times, people resonate with that, right? And an interesting point. Today I coached someone, and he was approaching businesses. It says words very clearly: no soliciting. All right. Now he's learning, and he was like, "How do you address that?" I'm like, I go in there. Just so you know, for the record, I can read. I call it out. I'm trying to look, just so you know, I'm not coming in not understanding it. I can read. Right. I like to have a lot of fun with what I do with work. Do you like to have a lot of fun? And I'm building rapport.
Sure.
Okay. So there's a different approach. The idea is always be transparent in everything. It's okay to share everything as long as you're being legal, ethical, and moral. Be transparent. So
Yeah,
I hope that resonates with people. There's no slick sale.
well, and I think, and again, I think that comes with the sophistication that we're seeing nowadays more so than in times past. Like, the implication, and by the way, I've used similar examples in the past. Like when you said that everyone is in sales, I say the same thing. I say, your doctor is in sales. Where do you think your doctor or your dentist now has this beautiful waiting room and has iPads for the kids? They're selling you because they're understanding more and more than a patient, you're a customer. And so even doctors are in sales. Everyone is trying to sell something. And the reason it has a negative connotation, I think, for a very, very long time, it was sort of like the used car salesman mantra. Nothing wrong with used car salespeople. But when somebody gets told you sound like a used car salesperson, that's not meant in a complimentary fashion. That's meant like you're trying to sell me something by being deceptive and not telling me the whole truth. That's sort of how I interpret that. But I feel like nowadays sales is becoming more sophisticated.
You give me two thoughts based on what you just shared, Mario. First one is this. I've seen it online. I know people online where they're selling courses where they teach people how to public speak, and they've never spoken in a public room. They're just excellent marketers. So that's the reason why there's big cynicism out there. There's a lot of fake stuff. And I'm not here just to promote me and just say how real I am. I'm just saying that you have to sift through a lot of bad seeds out there who are selling stuff in a box. So that's the first thing. The second thing that came to my mind as you were talking there is there's a lot of telling out there. All right. A lot of people just want to tell people how good they are or what they bring or what they do. And the truth of the matter is that's another formula. I'll ask you, is it better to tell someone something or better to get them to tell themselves?
Sure, get them to tell themselves.
Okay, so every strategy, every thought process that comes out my mouth every time and teaching is always getting them to understand, how do I get this other person to tell themselves that they should do something rather than me telling them, that setup. I don't know why, but that came to my head as you were just talking there around, what's out there and some of the cynicism. But I see everything is sales. I agree with you. A lot of people just tell people how great they are. The online game, some of the sales, though, there is so much fakeness, and that's why people are cynical and people going 100 million miles an hour through stuff, and that it's a shame. That's why people get a bad rap.
And I think part of the cynicism also comes, it's in a very self-inflicted, because this is a little bit of what happens. And I can only speak to the sort of what I've experienced in the real estate industry.
Right.
There's a person that gets brought into an office to become some sort of a coach for the office. And so that person, strategically gets brought to like the most influential people in the office first. And then those people give their blessing. And then their blessing becomes their endorsement. And so a lot of times you have some of these, coaches being endorsed by people who've never used their services just because they were asked to endorse as sort of their, they're contributing activity towards that office.
Right.
They say, hey, Mario, this hasn't happened to me. But
yeah.
But for example, hey, Mario, we're bringing Jamie to be a productivity coach in the office. It'd be great if you can spend 15 minutes with him, and in the sales meeting, if you don't mind, just kind of telling people some of the value that you see in what he brings. And so you have an office of like 50 people, and then I get up and I say that I'm the top producer in the office, and I say, hey guys, just want to let you guys know I spent some time with Jamie. He is great. He's such a smart guy, and I think everybody should take the time to listen to what he has to say. And if you find a way to do business with him, that'd be great. And so people get this sort of false endorsements that create further cynicism, because then you have a group of agents that sign up to that, and then they're disillusioned when it doesn't work out. But
okay, so for instance, you asked me how can I be different, right, from other people? I believe that the value has to come from their own self-belief, not from your belief.
Endorsement.
Yeah, no endorsement necessary. It's like when I go in a room, here's what I do. I'm like, look, anytime that you love something I share, or I've taught you something of value that's new to you, just write on a sheet of your name and the word boom. Do you know? And then I make sure that within that hour, every single person has had one boom moment, because I set the expectation that one boom moment is that's a success, right? To learn something you didn't know that can help you in an hour. And there's no promise of like this is going to make you tons of money, all right, learning this. But what I can share is this. If you get to the end of a year and you don't have any moments where you're like, oh, this is going to help me, this is like I've got more confidence, or I use this question, it really helped in this scenario, right? There's your money back. I think that's a very, that makes it more of a no-brainer kind of decision for someone.
And you dabble on substantive teaching, which I appreciate and I like. You don't dabble on more of the, let's sit down and visualize a forest, and then, visualize the fog in the forest, and like,
no, I'm not much into the meditation thing. I don't know if that's a flaw or a good thing, but it's not that I don't play that card, that scenario.
Yeah. And so I appreciate that, because when we're dealing in tangibles, it's a lot easier to be able to measure the worth of something. When you're telling me my soul is going to be feeling cleansed after 6 months, I'm like, what the fuck does that even feel like? I don't even know what that is. Like, what do you mean my soul is going to be cleansed? I don't.
Sounds like something that go well in California, by the way, Mario.
I think it goes very well. I think it goes very well over there. But another thing that you talked about, which was interesting, you touched briefly in this sort of acceptance in society about college education and formal training being the end-all be-all to success, and you share that you've encountered many people that have these college degrees that they don't put them to any use. What can you expand a little bit on that? Like, what gives you that thought, and why is that thought relevant to you?
Obviously, look, you've sworn during this radio podcast, so I know I can be colorful. Like, if I'm being completely blunt, all right, it's the greatest trick the devil ever pulled out there. That everyone's meant to send their kids to some college. Some people mortgage their very houses to send their kids to college, all right, because that's what is being sold to them that they do. And then they go through this conventional college, and then they're told at graduation, go the path less traveled. Well, any successful person out there will share with you that they don't reinvent the wheel. They find common habits and things that successful people do, and then they copy them, right? 98% of people who come out of college are coming out with huge debts. Then they want to go and get married, and then they like pets and mortgages and things. It's like they're not paying off the debt. And then how many people go through college? You don't need to go through college to become a realtor. Right? How many people go through college and then suddenly be like, oh, I'm going to become a realtor? I'm not going to say that my kids won't go to conventional college. I'm not going to say that. If they want to do that and they enjoy it, great. But they're not going to be under the premonition that that's what's going to make them have success in life, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. I don't know when it started. I think it was probably sometime in the... It's difficult for me because I didn't grow up in the United States, but I think in the United States it started probably in the 70s, and then maybe like overseas, back home, it was in the 80s, where it was sort of like, if you want to be successful, you got to go to college and you got to get that bachelor's degree, because that's sort of the ticket for it. And once that sentiment was built enough in society, then the colleges were like, wait, we have it made here. So how do we become even more profitable? Oh, okay, let's give out loans to people that we don't have to worry about their credit worthiness or their ability to repay, because they can never discharge it to bankruptcy and just throw money at them. And we'll inflate tuition because we have this artificial demand built up by giving people the money to pay for it, so it doesn't seem as if they would shop for it as much. And it
Watch this. You're going to love this. It's called fill in the blanks. It's a strategy that you can utilize to know that when you're engaging with someone, that they're listening to what you're saying. So the audience, as they're listening to this, Mario, we're going to go through this. Where did you grow up, by the way?
in Caracas.
In Caracas. Okay. Even though you grew up in Caracas, I promise you, you're going to be able to fill in these blanks. All right. We're told to go to school. All right. And whilst we're in school, we have to get really good what?
Great.
Great. See, regardless, Caracas, America, England. All right, great. And then we go to school, and then we then go to college, and we expected to get more good.
Great.
And then when we leave college, all right, mum and dad don't want us living at home anymore, so we have to start making money. So we go out and we get a
Good job.
And what does JOB stand for? Anyone ever explain that to you?
Mm-mm.
Just over broke. All right. And then with that just over broke situation, we're expected to save our money to have this glorious
Home.
and retirement, right?
Yeah.
Does that work for most people out there? No. The audience, they follow along. I do that in front of big groups of people, like around the country. I've always done it. They always finish those sentences. It just is an illustration. One, it's teaching people, hopefully the audience here, that when you're engaging with clients and you want to make sure they're listening to you, because people do dart off at different points. One, we know if they're still listening to this podcast. But two, it's showing you that we are all conditioned, whether it's Caracas, England, America.
Sure. Indoctrination is very real.
And it's all conditioned just to get a job, a job. But people then become into real estate, and the reason we're here and keep it real estate, people come to real estate because they feel that what they were doing over here was so dark, all right, because they're confined to an office, and they suddenly feel like they've got all this flexibility. And then, as you shared aptly, and they're not seeding it the right way for that flexibility. Yeah. So it's definitely a colorful world. It's full of lots of cynicism. I know that before I even came on here, you had an air of skepticism. Do you know what I mean? Like, what's Jamie bring? And I did some things beforehand that I knew that you were like, oh yeah, no, that was cool. I learned that, you know? So
we talked about this a little bit. I'm a skeptic, and people have said that, and I don't know if I want to continue like wearing the badge of skeptic, because I'm a critical thinker to a fault. When I
remember, skeptic is a good thing.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Yeah.
I'm not fully sold on it, because I think even though you're correct on the definitions, I don't think perception is reality. And I think that perception on the street oftentimes is that a skeptic and a cynic are oftentimes the same person, even though they're not.
Oh, absolutely. Look, perception is never reality. People look at me like I told you, like people think, oh, it's all very easy for you to say this. You're British, 6'2", like great. What they have to understand, I'm just asking a question. When I went through the scenario of like, hey, what do you say when someone does something wrong to you? Whether you're American, English, doesn't matter. If you're saying, why did you do that? What were you thinking? You're giving up your time, regardless what you are. If you're a guy going up to a girl and you're American, you're saying, can I buy you a drink? And you're wondering why they take a drink from you and they're not talking with you after the fact. I know the answers. You should know the answers, but it doesn't change your behavior.
Sure.
It's like I'm going to call 100 calls. I'm going to go up to 100 girls just to wait for the one girl.
Play the numbers game.
Play the numbers game. And it's BS.
Yeah. And so where I was going with that is I can be skeptic, but I also I'm very open to logical, reasonable conversations. And so that's what I appreciate most about you, that I know you picked up on my skepticism, and you came in here knowing that full well. Obviously, you're an expert in communication, but no one wants to put themselves in a situation where someone is just going to berate them, or someone is just going to be an asshole to them. Like that, no one wants to do that just for the fun of it. so I appreciate you coming in here and understanding that beyond being a skeptic, I'm a person that likes to have reasonable, open conversations and understand where people are coming from. Because, by the way, part of the reason there's a lot of skepticism is a lot of folks don't have the opportunity to have a 1 hour and 15 minutes so far conversation that allows you to explain your points, explain your background, explain your thought process, explain your goals and approach, and everything that encompasses what you do. Oftentimes, you get a 30-minute elevator pitch, a 30-second elevator pitch, or a 30-minute class, in a brokerage per se, with some restrictions on time and the amount of people you're talking to, and so that's why I like to do this, because this open dialogue allows people to see beyond that 30-second elevator pitch, beyond the content that you teach on a pre pre-crafted class. Because as far as I know, you didn't do any other podcast this week, hour and 15 minutes asking you the same questions with the same dialogue flow. So this
No.
is all on the fly.
I actually when I do workshops, I actually pride myself on putting myself on the spot where I'm just like, throw anything at me. It's not and it's not an arrogance, it's a confidence that comes from just knowing conscious communication on how I'm going to deal with something. Thank you for having me on here to show and illustrate that, and I get the point. I like to believe, and here's where people in my workshops or clients see this. I teach something, and they're like, "Oh, that makes sense," So it's not there's no slick, there's no used car salesman. It's like, look, does it seem illogical to use the approach you're using? Does this make more logical sense? And then they're like, yes. I'm like, well done. You've had a boom moment. You've had an epiphany that takes place, and obviously the idea is for them to have as many as possible with that regard. So no, I actually I'd much rather speak to someone who's skeptical, because that's reality out there. All right, people, you don't get lay downs. It can exist, but it's very rare, right? So the idea is, the more we're challenged, the more we grow when we do that. So if I came in here and you knew me for a long time and what have you, it wouldn't be as impactful, in my opinion.
I agree. But on that note, we'll definitely do this again in the future, because you're a very interesting guy to talk to. So we definitely have to do this again.
I appreciate that. I would love to do this again. This has been fresh, keeping it real. I appreciate that.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much, Jamie.
Thanks.